they raised earlier. And then lo and behold, Democratic Senators Jay Rockefeller and Tom Harkin come out with a letter to the president urging that he get even more sweeping than that. We urge you to reject changes to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security that would cut benefits, shift costs to states, alter the structure of these critical programs, or force vulnerable populations to bear the burden of deficit reduction efforts. This goes on and on. They're trying to get 30 more senators or so to sign on to that. They're talking about a ratio of so-called spending cuts to revenues, more like 1 to 1. But a big chunk of those alleged spending cuts are rehash cuts from last year's debt ceiling agreement. Just put that back on the table. What we're talking about here then, if you're talking $4 trillion in savings over 10 years, $1 trillion of that is stuff we've already done. $1 trillion of that is for wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that have already been factored for being phased out, so no real cuts there. And then $1 trillion, I guess that's a jump ball because more than $1 trillion of the remaining figure is at tax increases. That isn't 1 to 1. That is a joke. Do not expect Republican Kentucky Senator Rand Paul to sign on. Senator, this thing is getting out of control.
Well, you know, since the spending cuts are a fiction, they're not real, they're make-believe, maybe that's what the tax increases should be as well. Now, I don't want to increase taxes. I think the only way to stimulate the economy is to leave more revenue in the hands of those who earned it, leave it in your states. I'd rather have the money left in Kentucky. I haven't seen any money spent in Washington that's useful. Most of it's counterproductive. So let's leave more money in the states and let's cut spending. We're spending too much.
You know, but they're not doing that. And I guess much of the Democratic leadership seems to be thinking that this election was a referendum on tax increases. I guess you could, in part, take from the president's victory that maybe his wanting to tax the rich might have been a factor. But I do think Americans were looking at getting spending under control. But that part isn't being considered remotely.
You know, if you want to say the public is for raising taxes on the rich, the public's been sold a bill of goods on this. If the public were to know the facts, the rich already pay most of the taxes. We have a very progressive tax code. Millionaires pay on average about 30% of their income, not to mention state income taxes and Social Security taxes. Most of the rich are paying nearly 50% of their income by the time we're done. And most of the income tax is paid by the wealthy. My point, though, is I don't care whether it's the wealthy, the middle class, or the poor. I don't want to divide us. I want to say there's the public sector and the private sector. The only way you get more jobs is by leaving more money in the private sector, no matter whose money it is.
We can debate this all we want. So I guess now Democrats are saying it is beyond debate. And I maybe foolishly and naively after election night, I thought, well, maybe the president and all sides will rise to this occasion and try to genuinely offer a constructive dialogue to not only get us off the cliff, but lay out a plan to get all of this under control. But I hear talk of stimulus now. Your colleague Chuck Schumer in New York is signing on for what could be a $500 billion jobs plan, and on we go. It's like stimulus is still in vogue, spending is still in vogue, piling up debt is still in vogue.
Here's the problem with stimulating it through government spending. The last time they tried it, it didn't work. It also cost about $400,000 per job. Government's not very good at creating jobs. Instead of trying to squeeze more money out of the economy and take it from productive business owners, let's leave it in their hands. I don't think the president got a referendum on raising taxes. The president won the election, barely, but he didn't get a referendum. The other thing is we still have enough votes in the Senate that he needs to come across the aisle and talk to us. I know of no conversation from the president with our side. If he wants a compromise, talk to us. There could be a compromise. I'm willing to compromise on saying that military spending could be cut, and so could domestic spending. That's where the compromise should be.
But, among your Republican colleagues, I don't see that part of a compromise either. Now, they've put revenues on the table, and I guess the devil is in the proverbial details. But when it comes to spending, they're very loath to cut their near and dear issues like defense, and they, for very valid reasons, just as Democrats will tell you, very valid reasons for, going slow on entitlements. But with that mentality being the case, what do you think is going to happen at the end of the year?
I think there'll be some really big, messy bill made in some sausage factory you'd never want to go to. That bill will be passed, and I will probably oppose it if it means raising taxes, because I think raising taxes is a mistake, particularly in a weak economy.
By the way, when you say raising taxes, Senator, do you include this offer that I guess Speaker Boehner has on the table, not formally on the table, not a rate increase, but closing loopholes and credits, because the president said that won't come close to giving you the money that you could get with a rate hike? Where do you stand on this whole thing?
To me, increasing revenue by closing deductions is raising taxes. I'll close loopholes if you lower rates, but you got to do something good for the economy if you're going to do something bad to the economy. So I'm not for just closing loopholes. That takes money out of the productive sector, sends it to Washington, and that's a mistake. So I'm not for just closing loopholes, but I would close loopholes if you lower overall rates, which would stimulate the economy.
Senator, real quickly, what did you make of Mitt Romney's remarks to backers that what hurt him was all the freebies the president was giving out to his base, and that made the difference?
I think we as Republicans, if we want to grow the party, have to somehow develop some empathy for those who have been on government assistance and know that they don't all want to stay there. For example, I think there are many good people who have had to take unemployment insurance for a month or two but would like to work. So I don't think everybody on government assistance is a bad person. We need to figure out how to convince them, though, that their life would be better if they'd vote for policies that would help them get a real job and enter the middle class.
You seem to be trying to lead the Republican Party maybe in a more inclusive or accommodating direction. Some core conservatives in the party say it's selling out, not you, but that they can't be Democrat-like. What do you say to that? Because with your overture on immigration, many say it's a way to win over Latinos who've been, in lockstep with Democrats. What are you up to? What are you doing?
Well, it's always been my opinion that the people that are here, even those who are here illegally, if they'd like to work, we ought to figure out a way to let them work. I'm not against people working. I think immigrants are an asset, not a liability. And I think Hispanic voters won't listen to us if they think we're angry all the time about immigrants here. I came from a family of immigrants. We came and we worked hard. We spoke our own language for probably 50 years in my community. We spoke German in the church. So I'm not against people speaking Spanish either. But I think we need to convey that, or we're going to become a dinosaur. We're going to become extinct. And I don't think it means we have to compromise our principles. I still want a strict border control. I don't want people coming in illegally. But I think we should be receptive to legal immigrants. And we should figure out how to normalize those who did come here, even if they broke the law. We have to figure out a way, if they're willing to work, to normalize their situation. Also, it does have to do with electoral politics. We're not competitive, and we have to be competitive in these areas where we're not winning.
No, you're a good student of math, Senator. That's pretty good. Always good having you, sir. Be well.
Thanks.